Racing cars is for rich people, or at least it was, until a couple of dudes in Japan decided that enough was enough and completely changed the entire motor racing industry. And it all started with a simple track called Tsukuba, alongside a brand new form of racing, Time Attack, which led to a racing revolution so big that now some of the fastest drivers in the world aren't professionals, they're gearheads with project cars just like you or me. But how exactly did this revolution happen? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the beginning of motor racing as we know it. Back in the advent of the motor vehicle, organized racing was done by wealthy Englishmen and Frenchmen. They were either racing their cars, paying people to race their cars, or paying money to have the pleasure of watching other people race cars. For decades, that was the status quo, and it made sense too. Racing cars was something only wealthy people could afford. Hell, even owning a car in and of itself was expensive and a rare thing to see in a household in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And for a country like Japan, it wasn't until the post-war era ended in the late 1950s and until Japan started seeing some economic growth that affordable cars were even mass-produced. But as cars got more and more affordable and the everyday person became more and more accustomed to owning them, the interest in racing them naturally began to spread beyond the wealthy elite. There was just one problem: there was nowhere to go. While places like Europe and America at this point had numerous venues for racing, for the average Japanese enthusiast, your options were limited. Tamagawa, Japan's first ever racetrack, closed after the war. Suzuka, the oldest running track, was a day's journey away for most people, and Fuji, well, that was reserved for experienced racing teams and high-dollar machines, aka professionals and rich people. So the enthusiasts who couldn't afford to participate in professional racing found their own outlets in modifying their cars and competing in street races. And when racing on the streets and highways got too hot, there was always the secluded toge, which was also the birthplace of drifting as we know it today. And there's one thing about drifting and street racing that nobody talks about: the smell. It's not just 4 AGEs banging off the limiter or Yokohamas being shredded that one can smell up on the mountain. It's the BO of the sweaty drivers and their passengers too. Racing cars is high-intensity work. And if you jump into the passenger seat of a tofu delivery vehicle on the top of a mountain pass, you can basically guarantee that a variety of volatile bodily fluids will find their way out of you by the time you get to the bottom of that toge. 60 years later though, there's a new type of drift that eliminates all of that: drift car fresheners. Just slide Drift's metal clip on your visor and attach the gorgeous alderwood freshener that has been soaked in a clean fragrance oil blend of your choice. I've got pine to emulate the mountain pine and cedar trees from my local toge, so I'm in perfect harmony with the road and my ultra-powerful tofu delivery machine. But if that's not your speed, there are plenty of fragrances to choose from, like the citrusy Grove or the island-inspired Cabana. There are options to fit into any car, new or old. And Drift can go in your house too with the new Home Scent Diffuser. It plugs into any wall outlet and has 3 levels of diffusion to keep your house smelling clean and fresh for up to 30 days. And all of the fragrances are free of the harmful chemicals that the cheap air freshener dangling from your mirror has. So scan the QR code or click the link in the description and use promo code ALBON and make your daily drive or weekend cruise smell better and feel better with Drift. Of course, we all know street racing is irresponsible and dangerous, but it was that exact grassroots culture that laid the foundation needed for motorsports to cross the boundaries of social class. And that, my friends, is where this story begins. In the early 1960s, popularity in motorsports was skyrocketing in Japan, and the racing middle class was quickly outgrowing the streets they raced on. So in 1966, the idea of a new racetrack was proposed to Japan's Minister of Education and the Minister of International Trade and Industry. It was all very official, and the Japanese government knew they needed a place where car enthusiasts could test their machines safely and legally. They were tired of sending the cops out to every drifting disturbance, and it wasn't doing much to curb street racing anyways. So the Japan Auto Sports Center Foundation was formed to find a solution. And their idea was to build a circuit that was local, accessible, and designed to be a safe outlet for young Japanese hooligans. But even with this focus on access, the track was designed to meet FIA standards, allowing it to host major events if they needed. It would be just about an hour from Tokyo, and they would name it after one of the many famous mountains nearby, Tsukuba. After 2 years of construction, Tsukuba Circuit officially opened in 1970. They held their first track day on June 2nd, and well, it didn't take long for it to become the go-to place for amateur racing. Whether you had 4 wheels or 2, Tsukuba offered multiple track days every week. All you needed was your ride and an admission fee. Then in 1971, Tsukuba Circuit launched the Tokyo Production Race, a series where only road cars could compete. And I know that might sound like the most basic type of racing, but actually back then, it was groundbreaking. Racing at that point in time was pretty much only for race cars with racing teams, and Tsukuba was throwing all that out the window and saying, come one, come all, and run what you brung. Fast forward to the 1980s, and Tsukuba Circuit underwent significant changes. Medical bays, meeting rooms, changing rooms for drivers, and even showers were added. Guardrails and barriers enhanced safety around the track. This neighborhood water park was quickly becoming Hurricane Harbor, and amateur motorsports in Japan just kept on growing. But despite all these upgrades, the track layout itself remained unchanged, a testament to its perfection. You see, Tsukuba had everything. Slow corners, fast sweepers, hairpins, medium speed bends, all in a package that was just over a mile long. It was a track that truly tested both driver skill and car performance, all in about just 1 minute per lap. It's such a good test of car and driver that even after 50 years, Tsukuba is still used as the benchmark for manufacturers in Japan to test their sports cars. The 1980s also saw open wheel racing at Tsukuba with the Formula Pacific League and, more importantly, the All Japan F3 Championship. But none of those things are this little Japanese track's most important contribution to racing. To learn about that, we have to go to the 1990s. For many, the 1990s were the golden era of car culture, and few media outlets captured this era as perfectly as Best Motoring and Hot Version International. These iconic Japanese automotive shows didn't just showcase cars, they brought the essence of driving to life. They weren't just TV shows, they were windows into a world of car culture that we adore. And the best part, the hosts weren't self-proclaimed journalists like myself sitting in their garages. They were legends of the car world. Keiichi Tsuchiya, Max Orito, Nobuteru Taniguchi, household names in the JDM community. And the cars, they were all relatable and attainable. Supras, RX-7s, GTRs, NSXs of course, but also Integras and Civics. Anything and everything with wheels that rolled off a production line in Japan. And these shows often showcase these cars on some of Japan's most revered racing grounds, from the mountain passes of Gunma to wheel-to-wheel battles at Fuji, but the most memorable episodes, those were filmed at Tsukuba. You see, Tsukuba's popularity was at an all-time high, and while these quirky and possibly too handsy racing drivers were half of the equation, the other half was a little something called time attack. For those unfamiliar with time attack, let me explain. There's no wheel-to-wheel racing here. It's just the driver and their car pushing the limits to set the fastest lap time in their class. And Tsukuba's short technical layout meant that victories often came down to mere milliseconds. There was no room for error on a single lap. The car setup had to be perfect, from tire pressure to suspension tuning, and for the drivers, well, every inch of the track counted for them. It was a battle of precision and determination, where every adjustment, every sleepless night spent building their car came down to just a few minutes on track. And one single mistake would be the difference between being a nobody and becoming a part of JDM royalty. Time Attack was an absolute smash hit in Japan. It was the genre of racing that mattered, and every single shade tree shop was building some insane high horsepower rocket to try and win the next event. And if they were really pushing it, break the Tsukuba lap record. And for many smaller shops, it was the fastest way to get your name out there. A name etched alongside real racing legends like Keiichi Tsuchiya, who broke the GT car record with a 51.875 second lap in the Arda NSX at his own retirement party, finally beating out Motoyama's 53-second lap in the famous Pennzoil GTR. By this point, if you were a top JDM tuner and didn't have cars competing at Tsukuba Time Attack, then let's be honest, you weren't a top JDM tuner. Take HKS, for example. Now, we all know about HKS and their GTRs, but What you may not know and should know is that HKS and Tsukuba have a long storied history together. Some might call it a toxic relationship, but with a different type of gaslighting. They had these project cars called the HKS TRBs, aka Tsukuba Record Breakers. TRB-01 was a souped up Lexus IS 300 made completely of carbon fiber that set a 55-second lap at Tsukuba Time Attack in 2001, but the organizers voided the record. Why? Because this was a street car event, and well, one look at that IS 300 and you knew it was way too far gone to sneak into this class. But that little setback was only fuel for the HKS fire. Enter the HKS C230R, the TRB-02, possibly the most famous Mitsubishi Evo 8 in the world. At its core, it still had the iconic 4G63 engine, but this one was dialed up with every single trick in the HKS catalog. The end result was a 2.3-liter, 550 horsepower, fully carbon fiber car that was perfectly balanced with power to all four wheels. And while 550 horsepower might not sound like much to today's standards, at Tsukuba, you needed a lot more than raw power to win. For one, you needed a serious driver. Enter Nobuteru Taniguchi, 3-time Super GT winner and D1 Drift champion, who was also the driver behind the TRB-01. If anyone was going to break a record, it was him. They entered the Tsukuba Time Attack 2006, and despite stiff competition from their various competitors, Evos, FDRX7s, and NSXs, Taniguchi-san and that HKS Evo set a new record of 53.5 seconds. A record so dang quick that it stood the test of time for 5 years. And although that record has fallen many times since then, no record has ever lasted as long. Now, there is one thing. HKS by that point was a pretty big name in Japan, and Tsukuba Time Attack was always about power to the people. Every event was full of Joe Schmoes, or Jiro Shiros like you and I, who had a garage-built death trap ready to beat the top dog professionals. And there's no better example of that than a man by the name of Under Suzuki. You see, Suzuki-san didn't have a JDM tuning shop like HKS, and he wasn't a decorated legend like Taniguchi-san. No, he had an ordinary office job, regular 9 to 5, but it's Japan, so it's more like a 9 to 9. My point is that Under Suzuki was just like any of us. He was just a guy with a project car. But unlike any of us, he finished his project car. And that project was a Nissan S15 Silvia. And every minute that he wasn't in the office working his day job, he was in the garage working on his dream car. It started off as just taking his car out to Tsukuba on days off to relieve some stress from the work week, but Suzuki was freaking fast, and things escalated very quickly from there. Small adjustments here and there to make the car feel right quickly turned into an obsessive eye for tuning, just to see if he could shave milliseconds off his lap time. And with upgrade after upgrade after upgrade, it wasn't long before his S15 was a full-on track weapon. The engine started as an SR20 with a swapped head from a Neo VVL, basically Nissan's version of VTEC. And then all the internals of the block were gutted and replaced with stronger forged parts, all to be strong enough for the big Garrett turbo strapped to the side. The final result was an 800 horsepower engine mated to a Hollinger 6-speed sequential gearbox. Add in the very custom dry carbon aero, custom suspension, Yokohama AO50 GS tires, and all of a sudden, a random Japanese office worker was now in a machine that could win the biggest time attack event in Japan. And at the 2012 Yokohama Time Attack, Under and his S15 crossed the line at Tsukuba in 52.649 seconds, setting the new course record for a tuned car on street legal tires, and for the first time in 5 years, beating HKS. It was a huge achievement, but the truly astonishing thing was that this was just a man who built his own car and had a singular mission to just beat everyone else. And that, my friends, was the magic of Time Attack, a magic that finally started to spread outside of Japan and around the world, first to Australia, with the Super Lap Australia event being held at Oran Park back in 2008, which eventually morphed into the World Time Attack Challenge in 2010, which to this day is one of the biggest time attack events on the planet. Then there's the Time Attack Championship in the UK, the Time Attack Series in Italy, the German Time Attack Masters, and here in the States we now have the growing Super Lap Battle events and Global Time Attack Series. And thanks to underappreciated modern day media outlets like Narita Dogfight, one of my favorite YouTube channels, Time Attack continues to grow in popularity, thanks to the excellent coverage of the best time attack builds that Japan has to offer. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that the idea of setting fast lap times began at Tsukuba, but the sport of time attack and the influence set by Tsukuba is the reason that the world is now racing the clock instead of racing each other. And it was one of the earliest proofs that racing could be for everyone, not just rich people. Today, Tsukuba's original layout remains unchanged, preserving the challenge that has defined it for decades, but that doesn't mean the track hasn't expanded. Now there's an oval track for auto races, there's a Gymkhana course, there's a whole separate track, the 1,000-meter course for motorbikes and smaller track days, and then there's the main course, which had a chicane added halfway through for a motorcycle layout. All of which was added so that there was something for everybody: spectators, motorcyclists, drifters, racers, and so on. But the heart of Tsukuba still lies in that main course, where anyone can register for a track day or a time attack and measure their times against the greats. And each year, the best of the best come together for Attack Tsukuba, the world's premier time attack event. Even in 2024, it's a melting pot of the top JDM tuners, builders, drivers, and local enthusiasts, all with one goal: to put down the fastest lap. And because of that melting pot of car enthusiasts, you get some of the coolest cars on the planet on one paddock, like Yasuji Asai and Atsushi Hirano's Honda Civic EK9, a 276 horsepower NA built K24 engine car that broke the front engine front-wheel drive NA record by putting down a lap time of 55.964 seconds. Or Atsushi Shimaya and his 460 horsepower FDRX7 sponsored by Advan and Endless. He put down a 54.483 second lap in the turbo class, beating out his own record when the same car made 600 horsepower. And then there's Fire Ando. If you were breaking the 1-minute barrier at Tsukuba, you were a darn good driver, far from a novice. And if you were able to get into the mid-50s, then you were amongst the handful of legends that could really drive. Now, if you got into the low 50s, then you were probably a record breaker and part of the Time Attack Hall of Fame. But what if your lap time started with a 4? Well, then you must be Fire Ando. Sure, HKS broke the 50-second barrier in 2018, but that was on slicks, which might as well be a super GT car like the Drift King. But Fire Ando was on street tires, Advan A050s to be exact. The nickname Fire, by the way, comes from the fact that he was known to push his cars to the absolute limit, and they would often catch fire. Thankfully, last year, his absolutely insane Mitsubishi Evo would not catch fire. Just look at this thing flying down the track. Fire Ando and his Evo put down an absolutely unbelievable time of 49.897 seconds. The first tuner car to ever do so. What a legend. This year was Attack Tsukuba 2024, and it was the biggest turnout ever. And there's nothing like watching full car walkarounds from the Narita Dogfight channel, exclusive access videos from Video Option, and of course, full-on POV cockpit videos direct from the Attack Tsukuba channel itself. Which leads me to our last driver, this year's Attack Tsukuba winner, an American driver in an American car on American tires. Truly a testament to how global Time Attack has become. Faris Khartoumi was the Texan behind the wheel of a Corvette C6 Z06, with a fully built twin-turbo 427 LS from late model engines capable of 2,000 horsepower but running 800 to 1,000 in racetrack. His fastest lap was a time of 51.234 seconds, more than enough for the American to win Japan's premier time attack event at the mecca of time attack racing. Faris, like many drivers now, have entered their names into the history books, and their records are more than just numbers. They're a testament to the dedication, innovation, and sheer willpower it takes to conquer one of Japan's most challenging tracks and one of racing's most popular formats. But it's also a testament to those Japanese enthusiasts nearly 60 years ago who created a home for people like you and I to race our cars and deepen our love for motorsports and maybe become a record holder along the way. But as you know, records are made to be broken. And at Scuba, the pursuit of the fastest lap continues to this day. And thanks to the sport of time attack, who knows? Maybe one day, it'll be you with that record. Thanks for watching. If you want to talk more about time attack or racing in Japan, join us at our Discord linked below the like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Albon for more content like this. I'll see you guys in the next one.